I am David Sanford of Sanford Heisler Sharp McKnight, chairman of a national civil rights law firm, and I am delighted to have with us here Leigh Anne St. Charles, my partner, who happens also to be the managing partner of the Nashville, Tennessee office. Welcome, Leigh Anne.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have an opportunity to sit down and just chat about life. And what I want to do is find out more about you, where you grew up, what your formative years were like, where you went to school, that sort of thing. So take me back in time to your early childhood.
Okay. Well, I am a Kentucky native, although I grew up in Georgia. So I like to say I'm just from the South generally.
Where in Georgia?
I grew up in Middle Georgia, in Perry, Georgia, a little town off of I-75. And I went to Western Kentucky University. So again, very Southern, very small town. That is all I really knew. And then I got into Columbia Law School, and it changed everything. That was really the pivotal moment for my life, my kind of small, contained Southern life. I got married on Saturday, and we packed up a minivan on Sunday, and we drove up to Manhattan.
Wow.
And I started law school that week.
So I'm going to backtrack here a little bit. You were born in Kentucky.
Born in Kentucky.
You still have family in Kentucky?
Still have lots of family in Kentucky, yes.
And you moved at what point to Georgia?
I was in Georgia from first grade through graduating high school.
Wow. So you're in the South. You spent your life in the South, family in the South. Everything you knew was Southern and Southern based. And somehow you wind up at Columbia Law School. Did you always think that when you were growing up in the South that you were thinking about big city, New York City, as a place to live or a place to work or a place to go to school?
No, not at all. I loved living in the South. I loved growing up in Georgia. It's a beautiful place. I'm very proud of Kentucky. And then Columbia kind of came out of nowhere. It was one of those, what are we going to do? You're standing at a fork in the road, and I had a scholarship where I could have gone to Vanderbilt and stayed in the South, or I could have done something completely different. And I decided to do something completely different and go from small town in Kentucky up to, the Upper West Side in Manhattan. And I'm so glad that I did.
How did you find that transition?
That transition was difficult. It was very difficult. It is also what I credit a ton of my success to. Getting out of the world getting out of the mindsets that you've grown up with your whole life. There's nothing like it. It's a prescription I would write everyone. It was tough. I had to adjust and learn a new way of life, a new culture, a new interaction. And ultimately, I'm a better person for it.
Did you develop friendships and relationships that you maintain today from that experience?
I did. I found law school thrilling. I found living in New York thrilling. Everything was just this wide-eyed wonder. I didn't have lawyers in the family. I didn't really know much about being a lawyer. So the moving to New York was one big change, but really just learning this practice of law, it felt like anything was possible. And so through that, I think I was a very approachable person because I was just so excited to learn, to meet people, to meet new people, to learn new subjects and areas. And that, I think, has served me well, to be curious, to have that inherent curiosity, intellectual, and a curiosity about people, a connection to people. I think that it's no surprise to me that that has ultimately led me to a job like this, where I am connecting with people on a daily basis.
most people, I think it's fair to say, when they go to law school, don't really have an idea as to what type of law they're going to practice, as to what type of law would even resonate with them. Many people just try out different things and have a circuitous path. Ultimately, if they're lucky, winding up in a job or in a position that they love. If they're not so lucky, maybe just, getting jobs enough to pay the mortgage. But when did you realize you had a passion to do the work that we do at Sanford Heisler?
That is a funny question. I'm laughing because in hindsight, I think I knew that all along. But you don't know what you don't know. And so I am in law school. And after you take that first year of preordained classes, you can start to choose your own classes. And the classes that I took were, gender discrimination, anti-discrimination. I was a TA for disability discrimination. I took labor law. When I graduated law school, I went into big law, like so many of my colleagues and friends did. I worked on classic big corporate defense litigation, defending large corporations. And then I did pro bono work. And my pro bono work was, representing a woman who was the victim of discrimination. It was representing a man in an asylum claim who was homosexual and lived in a country where it was against the law to be homosexual. And you could be imprisoned for life for the crime of just being who you are and living, your life in that way. And it wasn't until I came to this firm and I started doing this work on a daily basis that I thought, aha, this is what has been missing. This is what, again, in hindsight, I can see it so clearly. That was my interest. That's what I was drawn to from the beginning. But it wasn't until I started actually doing the work that it clicked, that I thought, well, this is what I want to do.
Was there a seminal moment where it started clicking? Was there a case? Was there an experience? Was there an interaction with a client? Was there a relationship that you wound up having with colleagues on a team that was really exciting? I mean, what, when you look back, was responsible for that time when it clicked?
For me, I mean, there were so many little things, I'm sure, coming to this firm, just being surrounded by brilliant colleagues, representing, brilliant clients. But the moment that really sticks out to me was representing, it was a case that you and I worked together, representing female partners in a large law firm. And it just hit so close to home to know these women who had a trajectory much like mine, education, got out of law school, went and worked in big law. It really resonated with me that this could be me. If I had stayed on that track, this could be me in 10 years. This could be any one of my friends from law school that are in a large corporate law firm. They're doing everything right. They've got the education. They've got the billable hours. They're smart. They're hardworking. And that's not enough because they also happen to be women. And that felt like such a personal cause, personal mission to help, give a voice to what it's like to be a woman in the law that is being discriminated against, that it clicked into place. That was my aha moment, that I can be a voice for these highly educated, brilliant women that are still falling victim to discrimination.
It's really shocking that we could have that kind of conversation now in 2026. I found it shocking to have that conversation in 2016.
Yep.
I found it shocking to be doing the race discrimination and gender discrimination work I did in the late 90s throughout the country, mostly in the South. People don't realize, unless they experience it, how bad things can be in otherwise enlightened society, right? You can live in a world where, generally speaking, people, I think, try to do the right thing, and do the right thing. But there are a lot of people who fall way short, and falling way short means they violate the law in various ways, and that's where we come in. But the fact that it remains as rampant as it is, and it's a conversation we have to constantly have, even with C-suite executives at major corporations in the United States, even with law firm partners. We represented a female chairwoman of a law firm not so long ago in a very significant matter. We've represented law firm women at the majority of AmLaw 100 law firms in America over the course of the last 12, 13 years. That's just an incredible statistic, and that's just one firm. And we do this more than any other firm, but it's just one firm and one firm's perspective. But it gives you an idea of how deeply rooted the problem of, say, gender discrimination is in the workplace, even at law firms.
Even at law firms, I think that is something that has really been an eye-opening experience for me. I think a lot of people have a concept in their mind of what discrimination is and what a victim of discrimination is. And having done this for years now, I think what's so shocking to so many is you cannot be smarter. You can't outsmart discrimination. You can't outwork discrimination. You can't, stay silent and just go along with it and keep your head down and work through it. It's a prevalent and irrational force. And there is no person in this country that is insulated from it. There is no, woman who can, be better than, be smarter than the forces of discrimination. If you work for someone that's biased, if you work for a company that doesn't treat people equitably, then it's going to happen.
What do you love most about the job?
There's a lot that I love about this job. I think the most satisfying part of it is getting to be a voice for people when they are going through one of the most difficult times in their life. We often are representing people who have had really, really successful careers. And they come to us and they entrust me with the times in their life when they feel powerless and they feel like their voice has been taken from them. And I find it incredibly powerful to be able to be a voice, to be a mouthpiece that's pushing back against these large corporate, powerful defendants. And it can feel sometimes like a David and Goliath, but every single time we're able to find a resolution for our client, to succeed in litigation, it feels like, wow, we took on Goliath and we won. And that is a satisfying feeling.
It really is a great thing to be able to represent an individual against a big corporation.
Yep.
An individual who might not otherwise get legal counsel or might not otherwise get competent legal counsel, and probably would never get as good as legal counsel can be found in our firm. And what a privilege and honor it is, right? To be able to represent someone against the biggest law firms in America, in federal and state courts around the country, and ultimately be victorious at trial, or ultimately get a resolution that is really satisfying to the client. Again, a resolution that they may not otherwise have gotten. It is a great feeling. It is something that is such a great aspect of this job, to realize that we can do that. And it's hard work, right? I mean, you have a family.
Yep.
You are a mother. You are a wife. You have a big extended family.
I do.
And a lot of obligations. And like so many professionals, men and women, I know I experienced this myself with my wife and child. there are sacrifices and there are compromises and there's juggling that we face as professionals. How do you manage that juggling act for your life?
Wow. Like every working parent in America, it's one day at a time, one moment at a time. I think that the biggest thing I can say, because I've worked in this job as a working parent, and I worked in a large corporate defense firm as a working parent. And what really sets this job apart is when I have a late night, when I have to travel for work, I can explain to my children exactly why, right? I can tell them what I'm doing. I can tell them, about the challenges that I'm facing and the challenges that I'm fighting against on behalf of our clients. And they understand that. And they understand this job is so important. This job is important to fight back against, large corporations, to fight on behalf of, real people who are struggling, who are having a tough time. Any job, any working parent, you have to make sacrifices, right? Every minute you're at work, it's typically a minute you're not at home with your family. If you're going to make that sacrifice, if I'm not going to be at home with my children, with my husband and extended family, it better be for a darn good reason. I never have questioned while working here that every minute I'm away from my family, it's for a darn good reason.
It's a darn good reason, and it's still difficult, right?
Still difficult.
Still presents its challenges that we triage every single day.
Every single day.
You have done a lot of great work in the firm in discrimination contexts and other contexts that relate to civil rights. You also have managed to evolve into one of the nation's leading experts and lawyers and litigators in the 401k space. You co-chair with Charles Field what's known as our ERISA practice, our 401k mismanagement practice.
Right.
Talk about that practice, but before you do, how did that happen that you went from being an all-purpose great lawyer in the firm doing many different things to focusing on an area of practice which now is recognized in our firm because of your efforts and because of Charles Field's efforts as the nation's leading firm in the benefit space, in the 401k space, recognized by Law 360 just this year as the nation's leading firm. How did that happen?
Well, I mean, like so many things, it wasn't an intentional move. It happened because a case came in that was challenging large corporate overreach. I mean, when you think about it, retirement plans, these 401k plans, it's billions of dollars of people's savings, right? It's workers who are entrusting billions of dollars to their employers and trusting them to do what's right.
And that's in some cases billions with a B.
Billions with a B. Yeah, in many cases. I mean, you think about any large Fortune 500 company. If you aggregate all of the retirement savings of all of its employees, current and former, it's a ton of money. And to be fair, I do think most companies really do try to do what's right. Sometimes either, willfully or negligently, I'll say, we find that these companies who are entrusted with, 5, 10, 15 billion dollars of their workers' money and savings, they absolutely breach their fiduciary duties. I don't know how else to put it. They turn a blind eye to things like an underperforming fund that might have multiple billion with a B dollars invested in it, where if they just paid attention, if they would just make a very simple switch into a more productive, better earning fund, then all of their employees would be better for it. And that isn't happening. And so I really feel like this is just like a discrimination case, just like, many of the other types of cases that we brought at this firm. This is being a voice for people who are really at the mercy of large corporate interests. Now, sometimes, again, it's because you have a group of people who are told to manage the 401k and they're busy and this is not really their job. They don't get paid for this. They are full-time employees that have completely disparate duties and they just don't do a very good job. And sometimes you have cases where, you have several $billion just sitting there tempting a corporation. What if we used this to make a better relationship with a customer, with a potential financier? What if we did a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours? And those are the ones that are so scary and so harmful and can really, decimate workers' entire savings.
And we saw that happen in most dramatic fashion recently with UnitedHealth.
Yes.
Talk about our case in UnitedHealth, which led to one of the largest recoveries in U.S. history, a $69 million settlement just this past year.
Yeah. That case was really, as you said, it was one of the most dramatic examples of how tempting it can be to have, I think in that case, it was $9 billion just sitting there. And, the judge in that case, there was an opening line in one of his opinions that said a reasonable trier of fact could easily find that United got caught with its hand in the cookie jar. And I'm paraphrasing, but that was the image,
close, yes.
The hand that they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar. Here was a $9 billion cookie jar where, what we alleged was United used that money to court a closer relationship with Wells Fargo, which was one of its largest insurance customers and also one of its financiers. That's who they went to underwrite debt. It just so happened when they were choosing an investment fund for the plan, they were also putting out to bid Wells Fargo's insurance contract. There we happened to get really dramatic, damaging evidence in writing that indicated that that's exactly what happened. That's certainly what we argued to the judge. And the judge said a reasonable trier of fact could easily find that that was the case. So it's not every case that we get a kind of smoking gun piece of evidence or email. In that case, we did, which is why we were able to secure, again, one of the largest settlements for a single retirement plan in the country in an ERISA case. But it happens so much more than I think people realize. Not every case will be United. Not every case involves a $9 billion investment. But every case that involves retirement savings from workers who have been working at companies for years and years is worth standing up and pushing back for.
You learned this practice really within the last few years in the firm, working with Charles Field.
Yes.
And just working hard at figuring it out. And it's a great tribute to you to be able to make that transition on your own into an area that's complex and one that most people don't understand and most lawyers don't practice in. What was that like for you, just making that transition and pouring yourself into a rather arcane area of the law?
Yes, it is a niche area. It is an arcane area. I find it fascinating. Charles Field is brilliant. He is an expert in this area. There is not an investment question that I have ever had that I haven't been able to go to Charles and get answered. So that does make it a bit easier to have a true expert working alongside you as a partner. But I find, following the money, and here it's a lot of money at stake, it has been fascinating People really think this is a boring area, this is complicated, this is investments and basis points and mutual funds. But it's the the dirty little secret of the financial world. It is the underbelly of the financial world where you have trillions of dollars collectively in this country. It's a huge industry. It's absolutely rife with the potential for corruption. And in our experience, when you follow the money, you tend to find that there is some corporate entity, some corporate interest who is trying to exploit workers' retirement savings. So I find it fascinating. I feel a great sense of righteous indignation on behalf of workers across the country who, if it's not one thing, it's the other. They're just trying to save their money for retirement. They've been promised all these benefits, and then some other company is coming along and trying to skim something from the top. And so I feel like it's a real duty on our part to step in and say, absolutely not.
We've been speaking about discrimination and harassment in part. Clients come to us with a lot of concerns. They're concerned about the legal issues involved in their case, of course. They want justice. They want some kind of recognition of wrongdoing, ideally. If we wind up going to a public hearing and a trial, they get that public vindication from a jury. But they also have to navigate a very difficult path often to figure out how to proceed in light of, say, a termination, which is reputationally extremely harmful.
Yeah.
Can be professionally very harmful because it's very hard to get a job without a job. So if you're put in that compromised position, you may come to us bereft and really anxious about next steps. How do you counsel clients in that position who are concerned about their professional reputation, who are concerned about professional viability? What advice do you give them?
Yeah. So this is a really, really common situation. Most people, when they come, when they're at the point of reaching out to our firm, they have gone through, one of the worst experiences of their life, or they're in the midst of one of the worst experiences of their life, right? And it's more than just the loss of a job. It's often a loss of identity. It's a loss of career that they've invested so much time and effort into. And so I really counsel, our clients, the ones that reach out to us, I counsel them that we are here to serve you. There is no one size fits all resolution, at least not at Sanford Heisler. They are often really sophisticated corporate players, and they need a sophisticated, a nuanced, a complex solution. And so we talk through what that looks like. There are some people who really feel that they're at a point where they must speak out publicly. And so we are fully prepared to litigate. There are many, many others who really feel like if they file something publicly, if they file a lawsuit, it's going to be the final nail in the coffin of their career. And they're really concerned about that. And I understand that. We often advise clients, I often advise clients, the first step is to reach out and pursue some sort of confidential negotiation, something that grants a level of control back into the hands of our client who really feels like they have lost a lot of control, a lot of agency over their career. This is a way, by negotiating something confidential, some sort of severance or exit, we can address things beyond just dollars and cents. We can address things like non-compete provisions. We can address things like, public statements that might help to explain the loss of career, right? That might help explain the exit from the company. We can negotiate terms and provisions that the law doesn't allow. If we were to sue tomorrow in court and win, it's not available under the law. Having that type of negotiation or mediation allows us to really tailor a solution with as many complexities and nuances as the client needs. to address them where they are, meet them where they are, and find the best solution for their particular problem.
The best solution for their problem often involves a multi-pronged approach, right?
Exactly.
So we're very fortunate to have a law firm that has a holistic practice of the law. So we understand that their issues are legal, and that's why they're coming to a lawyer
Right.
to resolve a legal claim. But they're also emotional. They're often medical. They're sometimes physical. They involve reputation. We have crisis managers. We have folks we rely on who are tax professionals. We have people who are psychologists and doctors who can treat, not in the firm, obviously, but as consultants. We have press people who can help us through crises. There's a whole team
Yeah.
of people to deal with every aspect of what clients are dealing with. And that's unusual because I think most law firms don't do that. It's like most doctors aren't holistic practitioners either. But I would prefer to go to a holistic practitioner as a doctor, and I would prefer to go to a holistic practitioner as a lawyer, someone who really understands the full gamut of what I'm going through. And even if that person can't deal with each of those aspects, at least has access to people who can,
Yeah.
so that I don't have to feel alone with respect to all of those other issues. How important do you think that turns out to be for clients?
I think this holistic practice of law is huge. I think it makes all the difference, right? If I'm talking to a client and I'm counseling and advising them about what the best path is for them, if I don't know how to litigate, how can I advise them about whether or not litigation makes sense? If I don't know how to negotiate directly, how can I advise them about whether or not that makes sense? If I don't understand the emotional impact that discrimination has on their feeling of self-worth, of their identity, then how can I help find a solution to address those problems? I mean, discrimination is complex. Its effects are universal. When you are the victim of discrimination or harassment or retaliation, this is not a simple, clean-cut experience with a simple, clean-cut answer. This is something that may require professional counseling to help you understand even the full impact that has occurred. This is something that may require, a complex structured settlement paid out over multiple years. That's going to require a level of financial advising that we can help connect you with, advisors and professionals to figure out whether or not the solution makes sense for you. Because at the end of the day, our job is to go out and fight and advocate and be a zealous representative for whatever is best for our clients. Now, in order to do that, we have to know what's best for the client. In order for the client to know, they have to understand the full picture of what has happened, what is currently happening, and what they want to happen in the future. So coming to a holistic, practitioner that can really help them see and view the situation from multiple angles, I think that makes all the difference in the world. That's the difference in resolving a case and then negotiating a resolution that you really feel is best for you, that you've had control and agency and input. You feel heard. You feel that you've achieved some measure of justice and can move on to that next chapter in your life. That's not an easy feeling to achieve. That's a complicated, multi-pronged, solution right there.
People often think that a lot of things that happen to them because they're happening to them from the supervisor are legal, and often are surprised to find out that some of the things that obviously if it's blatant, if it's a sexual proposition or, something dramatic and obvious, most people have a sense that that's not cool. But they may not realize that, for example, that by engaging in protected activity, people can't retaliate. People are always worried about retaliation. And the way to kind of insulate yourself from a retaliatory act is to proactively speak out. Tell HR, tell a supervisor, tell a manager,
Yeah.
tell someone in the C-suite, even better, send a letter, and put them on notice that what's happening is wrong, whether you're right or wrong about it. Put them on notice so that then if they do retaliate, fire you, you have a clear claim because you've spoken out. So we've talked again a lot about discrimination. People don't realize generally what gives rise to a discrimination claim. In fact, there are a lot of myths surrounding retaliation and discrimination in the workplace. What myths do you see evident in people when they come to us, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of myths, a lot of misconceptions that people have. I think one of the biggest ones that I see is this notion that discrimination is really, it's overt, it's using aggressive or derogatory language. And in reality, it can be quite subtle. It is, talking over someone consistently in meetings. It is crediting someone else with your good idea. It is, refusing to acknowledge the hard work that you've put into something and instead acknowledging the hard work someone else put into something, right? It's not the case that every or even most acts of discrimination are someone yelling a derogatory term. It's often small microaggressions compounded over time, and people can really question, not their sanity, but question their own reality. And what's interesting, I find, is what often leads people to call me, to call you, is not necessarily the discrimination. It's the indignity. It is one step too far where someone has disrespected them publicly or overtly, and that's what pushes them over the edge to call us. And often that's not even the legal claim. But I think people will rationalize away a lot of, what you or I would find quite shocking discrimination because they have been told, discrimination looks like this, harassment looks like this. I think another myth that we encounter a lot is this notion that, victims of discrimination are vulnerable, low wage hourly workers, it's domestic workers, that these are really the people most susceptible to discrimination. And certainly it is true that, there are large swaths of the working population who are very vulnerable to discrimination. What we have found is there is no, education level that insulates you from discrimination. There is no work product that is good enough that you will now be free from discrimination or harassment or retaliation. I think that there is a sense of safety in silence sometimes. This notion that I can just put my head down, and if I work hard enough, and if I put up with it, if I take it on the chin, then eventually everyone will see what a good sport I am, what a good team player I am, and they'll back off and I'll get a promotion or I'll get credit where it's due. Mm-hmm. And it could not be farther from the truth. Yeah. What we see is if you stay silent in the face of discrimination, all that does is send a big green light to keep doing this, to keep escalating. Really one of the best things that I think people can do is, one, trust your instinct, right? When you're in a situation that feels off, right? Trust your instinct. And then speak up, right? Now that can look different for different people. Maybe it's filing with HR. Maybe it's filing an anonymous, employee hotline report. Maybe it's reaching out to an attorney to get advice on how best to speak up. But once you speak up, once you engage in that protected activity, You may still be discriminated against. You may even be, retaliated against, but you have certain legal protections that attach at that point, right? This is protected activity to speak up and say, I'm being discriminated against. This conduct is inappropriate and it needs to stop, right? That is something that, when a client comes and they have actually spoken up for themselves, even if the company continues to take adverse action, it gives us a really, really strong claim because we have something concrete to point to, a moment in time to say, this is when our client spoke up for themselves and asserted their rights. And here is how the company retaliated against them. So I think that's a common myth, to just keep your head down and work through it. In my experience, that is never going to be a viable solution to discrimination.
Leigh Anne, you are such a committed, passionate, engaged lawyer. I'm so proud to be your partner. I'm so glad you're in the firm. I'm so glad you found your way to us from Kentucky and Georgia and Columbia. It is a real pleasure to talk with you, to learn more about your life, to hear your thoughts about the practice, and to really reflect on what is truly a remarkable journey leading to heading up the most recognized law firm in the United States in many areas, but in your area in particular, in the benefit space, the 401k space. Congratulations for all of that. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.